Greetings. It's Monday, May the 26th, 2025. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Monday Morning Report. Memorial Day is today here in the United States, where we remember those who served and died in our nation's wars and conflicts, usually with the grilling of meat in our backyards, parks, on the beach, and other places, along with beer, other spirits, junk food, snacks, and just sitting around and basically shooting the breeze. That's for the adults, children running around, partially in celebration that school will soon be out for the summer. That's a tradition here in the United States that dates back to when most of us worked on farms and the children were needed at home to help with the harvest. So school ended in June, and they didn't usually return until September. It's also the day here in the United States where gentlemen are free to start wearing white slacks with your sport coats. That's if you go by the more civilized rules of our ancient American culture. And Hillary Clinton is rearing her ugly head today. She wants to spoil it for all of you. That's so like her, isn't it? She's put out the word on social media that we should all talk to our family, friends, and neighbors today about how Donald Trump is ruining the country. We really have to disrupt today and make it all about, well, her. It seems to me that she's now entering her Joe Biden phase. Actually, losing touch with reality, are we, Madam Secretary? Well, she is what she is, and there is no reforming Hillary Clinton, whether she's in control of her faculties anymore or not. The war between Russia and Ukraine is heating up, and wars never heat up in a good way. Russia says it launched some 367 missiles, drones, and other such devices against Ukraine over the last day or so, and they targeted a lot of civilian places, including the capital of Kiev. Lots of damage, but no formal or reliable reports as to how much or how many people were injured or killed. As I record this, Russian media is reporting more attacks are currently taking place. President Trump is livid over how President Putin is handling things, and he's expressed what seems to be sincere surprise at the ramped-up hostilities between these two combatants who've killed so many people between them. Sorry, Mr. President, it's becoming painfully obvious that both Mr. Putin and Mr. Zelensky really don't want to make peace at this point. And sometimes such insanity happens in the course of human events. Motivations, well, that's up to anyone to speculate on. Putin and Zelensky really do deserve each other, though, if you want to be honest about this whole mess. It seems to have gotten personal between these two, and that's not the way leaders of countries are supposed to behave when it comes to armed conflict. It's being suggested in some places that President Putin was less than happy at being caught in a Ukrainian drone swarm while flying in his helicopter near Kursk not too long ago. Nothing happened, but it may have been a pretty close call for the guy, probably closer than many of people in Russia are willing to admit. Well, to be fair, I'd take that a little personal too, but then again, I'm not head of a major country. The tragedy is, of course, that millions of Ukrainians and Russians are paying the price for being in the way of these two guys. And it just underscores why the United States should never, ever have gotten involved in that war except to help end it, which the Biden administration did not do. Once wars get started, they are very hard things to turn off, as many of the people in our cemeteries that we are honoring today could attest to if they could still talk. And speaking of wars and lots of death, Gaza is still being pulverized by the Israeli Air Force, shot up by the Israeli army, and the local population starved by a blockade. Word has it that the Israeli government will permit what is being described as, quote, minimal, unquote, aid to be delivered into Gaza to feed some of the 2.3 million people still living there. This is supposed to happen within a few days, but why it won't be permitted to happen immediately, if not sooner, well, your guess is as good as mine. I have some news for you folks, especially the people who are caught up in the Free Palestine movement. The Arab nations in that part of the world don't care one bit about the Palestinians, and they haven't for a very long time. The Palestinian people have been useful political pawns, but that's about it. None of the nations in that part of the world are going to go to war to help or to free the Palestinians, and the Israelis know that. Now, sure, nations like Iran might supply weapons and other nasty toys to their proxies in Gaza and Lebanon to mess things up, so that the sole nuclear power state in the Middle East will be on its toes. But in the end, they don't care about the Palestinians either, or how many people have been killed since the October 7th attack. Like it or not, for good or for bad, the Israelis have already won. And now that they are in what can best be described as a mopping up operation, well, they're not going to listen to anybody, especially with the United States having their back. What they're going to do now is make way for their inevitable annexation of Gaza and the West Bank, and after many years of occupation, they're probably going to annex what used to be part of Syria. This is the way they've been doing things, and it's what's on their agenda. Whether you agree with them or not, it's working for them. Oh, and remember those massive demonstrations around the world back in 2023 and 24? Supporting the Palestinians? You saw millions of people in the streets everywhere with Palestinian flags flying, and haven't seen much of those events lately, have you? That's because most people have gone on to something else that interests them. And the governments that were backing those demonstrations, and for the large part paying for them, they've gone on to other things as well. It's no longer fashionable to be demonstrating for the Palestinians unless you're at universities looking for something to do. Now, the reaction to the murder of the two Israelis in Washington, D.C. last week at the hands of a leftist Antifa type is having the expected effect. Prime Minister Netanyahu came out, of course, calling for all sorts of action, and all the people in the Jewish communities in the United States are calling for greater crackdowns on what is being termed anti-Semitism. New laws are being drafted as we speak. That's going to be something to follow. And again, never let a crisis go to waste. And the people who are backing that legislation are certainly not going to allow this one to go unused. Again, it's not so much the tragedy, it's how the people in power will always exploit tragedy. Now, down to the Southern Hemisphere. The fallout from the meeting at the Oval Office between Donald Trump and the South African president is still falling out. The accusation of genocide against the Afrikaner population of that once beautiful, well-run, civilized country is being condemned from all sorts of people and places, including, of course, the mainstream legacy media. They are acting like children in denial after having been caught doing something naughty. I wonder why. Could it be that they knew about this for a long time and decided not to report on it for some reason? Time will tell. Now, this is going to be a topic I'll be covering more in depth later on with separate writings and separate reports. But unlike many of my former colleagues, I've been spending some time doing research and speaking and corresponding with people on the ground there in South Africa. And the stories I'm getting from people there are much worse than I originally thought they'd be. But that will be for something I'm currently working on and will be putting out soon. Stay tuned for that. In the meantime, let's do a little drinking from the fountain of knowledge, shall we? Everybody is talking about genocide. Is it genocide? Is it not genocide? What's happening to the Afrikaners? Well, let me read to you the definition and the described conditions of genocide as defined by the United Nations. Yeah, those guys. Remember them? I'm going to read to you from the official rule book of planet Earth when it comes to such things as genocide. Now, I'm going to read directly from the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. This was approved and proposed for signature and ratification or ascension by the General Assembly Resolution 260A, Section 3 of 9 December 1948, entry into force on the 12th of January 1951, in accordance with Article 13. And it reads as follows: the contracting parties, having considered the declaration made by the General Assembly of the United Nations in its Resolution 96 of Article 1, dated 11 December 1946, that genocide is a crime under international law, contrary to the spirit and aims of the United Nations, and condemned by the civilized world, recognizing that all periods of history, genocide has inflicted great losses on humanity, and being convinced that, in order to liberate mankind from such an odious scourge, international cooperation is required. Hereby agree, as hereafter provided, Article 1. The contracting parties confirm that genocide, whether committed in time of peace or in time of war, is a crime under international law, which they undertake to prevent and to punish. Article 2. In the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. A. Killing members of the group. B. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. E. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. There is more, of course, but if you look at what's going on in South Africa with the Afrikaner people, that's what's going on in South Africa with the Afrikaner people. Of course, several of those situations defining genocide have and still are going on in other countries around the world, including the United States, I'm sorry to say. But like with what's going on in Gaza, too many members of the human family really don't care. It's one thing to have high ideals, but it's quite another thing to live up to them. Now, in closing, I'm going to go back to Memorial Day and the rather tragic American team sport otherwise known as war. Many Americans buried in cemeteries around the country will be honored today, but there are other veterans of our too many military conflicts who won't be, namely citizens of other nations who have aided the United States in its many foreign adventures and paid dearly for being our friends. And some of them become casualty of war years after their part in it has ended. Last month, in the county of Fairfax, Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C., 36-year-old Jamal Wali, an Afghan immigrant who had worked for the U.S. military in his home country of Afghanistan during our war on terror, well, he was stopped by a police officer because his car inspection sticker had expired. He immediately took on an aggressive tone with the officer and began to complain about his life and all the misfortune he had suffered since he was brought to the United States, which, if you know about such things, means he would have been killed by the Taliban if he had remained in his native land. But Mr. Wali was armed. He had a gun strapped to his hip, And if you watch the body cam video Fairfax County Police just released, you'll see and hear a man who has been pushed beyond his limits. No job, a string of traffic violations, no doubt frustration and anger that had built up to the boiling point, the apparent inability to take care of his family, and what seemed to be a deep-seated soul-level feeling of betrayal. Mr. Wally pulled his gun and started shooting. He slightly wounded 2 officers, one of whom seemed to have tried to disarm him. My guess is because he himself was a former military man and knew PTSD when he saw it. But another officer on the other side of the car proceeded to shoot Mr. Wally several times, which was appropriate action under the circumstances. The man died later in a hospital, and, if the reporting is accurate, he left behind a wife and 4 children. Thousands of miles from his homeland. Now, there is no excuse for pulling a gun on anyone and shooting them, no matter how angry or frustrated one gets or how much misfortune has been visited in one's life, especially if you're shooting at police officers. But this incident just shows how U.S. adventurism has far-reaching and often tragic consequences. The details of Mr. Wally's life and his time working with the U.S. military as an interpreter are still coming out, but it seems he did a pretty good job and was in some very dangerous battlefield situations. Natives that help U.S. forces coming into their country risk more than just getting shot at in combat. They risk their family's safety for being labeled as collaborators by the enemy. In this case, the Taliban, who are not known for their mercy or their good nature. Almost certainly they didn't treat his relatives very well after he left. It's been reported Mr. Wally's brother was killed as a result of his work for Uncle Sam, but that is not yet confirmed. But it is quite plausible. I predict that the story will come out, and when it does, it's going to reek of tragedy all around. The one thing that is certain is that Mr. Wally wasn't cut out for life in the United States. Not everyone from around the world wants to live like Americans. The planet Earth is a vastly different place than most Americans envision, especially those who march us into wars in faraway lands, without care or consideration of what it will mean years or decades down the road. Mr. Wally was quite literally a veteran who had served the U.S. military. But if one looks into such things, veterans like himself are not given the same consideration, treatment, or benefits as the regular American soldiers they often fought side by side with. They pretty much have to fend for themselves when they end up living among us when their war is over, and their usefulness to the American military-industrial complex has ended. And as we saw on a Fairfax street last month, their American dream can often end in a nightmare. I wonder what went through Mr. Wally's mind as he finally broke, started shooting, and knew that his life was over. Was he thinking about the mountains of his native Afghanistan when he was a boy, before he threw his lot in with the Americans? We can't really know, of course, but if you listen to what he was saying as his life was about to come to an end, one thing is certain: he regretted it, down deep into his soon-to-be departed soul. So this Memorial Day, keep in mind that even though we're remembering those who served our country and died in that service, most of whom were quite young when they left our world, we can't be afraid to question the reasons why they were put in harm's way in the first place. There is no such thing as a good war, and most of them were needless if you take a good, honest look at the reasons why they happened in the first place. And that's an uncomfortable thought for people who think war is just another spectator sport, something to cheer on and celebrate. and hope your team wins. But it's not. The people of Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan and other places know that all too well. And until enough of the American people really take that reality to heart, the cemeteries we visit on this day to lay flowers and plant flags will be filled with more and more of our young men and women who died in foreign lands for what later on will be thought of as needless causes promoted by those at the head of our affairs who have less than honorable motives. Keep in mind that those who die in war only die in vain if the lessons of the conflict in question are not learned by later generations. So the best way to honor our fallen today is to do our homework and pass the test that posterity places before us. That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share. Share with your friends and share with your enemies, and hope they become friends and allies in the future. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. This podcast originates at Substack. My handle there is aureliancolumn.substack.com. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember, Clown World and the deep state must be destroyed. And may you be visited with peace and happiness. Good day.